Husker Nation, one day I look forward to talking about big wins and beating ranked teams and what's Nebraska's postseason look like that hopefully includes a college football playoff at some point. Right now we're just not there and we know that. There are things that need to be addressed. There are things that need to be improved. There are things that we need to get better at. There are changes that need to be made. And the only way to do that is to be honest with yourself. If you're not honest with yourself, you don't give yourself an opportunity to get better and move forward in a more positive direction. So that's what this show is. There are parts of this show that I enjoyed more than others, but I love this football program, this state, and this university, and that's got to be the priority. So, Nebraska football, there are obviously some changes that need to be made. These are the changes that I believe Nebraska football needs to make. Don't go anywhere. Let's chat, shall we? Welcome to the Carriker Chronicles, the People Show. Checking the pulse of Husker Nation, brought to you by DPS Concrete Construction. Check them out at dpsconstruction.net. Also, carrikerchronicles.com. Ladies and gentlemen, it's where your year-round Husker sports hopes and dreams will come true. It's just science. I'm not going to lie to you. Today's show is going to be interesting. There's going to be some things that we need to talk about. There are changes that need to be made here at the University of Nebraska when it comes to our football program. What's going on right now just isn't good enough. And dare I say, a lot of it may not even be what we would deem acceptable at this point in time. There's going to be parts of this show, a lot of honesty, a lot of truth, a lot of my opinion, obviously. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. There is going to be some fun things, or at least funny things at the end of the show. So stay tuned. But if you're like me and you believe there's some changes, some of the changes I'm about to talk about, from development, the trenches, being a physical team again, not shying away from competition, getting bigger, faster, stronger this offseason, and much, much more that I'm going to talk about in this show, can help make a big impact and difference here at the University of Nebraska's football program, to smash the like button. Also, if you haven't done so yet, make sure you subscribe and or ring that notification bell if you're so inclined. It's bowl season. It's the off season. This is the most unpredictable time of the year. Shows may be going out at sporadic times. And if you'd like to keep in touch with what we're doing here, make sure you subscribe and or ring that notification bell. Again, in my humble opinion, I believe some changes need to be made. Now, there are some good things that have happened. There are some improvements that have been made, but we are not where we need to be. We're not where we want to be. We're not where we should be at year 3 into the Matt Rhule tenure, in my humble opinion. Now, when I sat down, I knew some things that were in my mind, some things that need to be improved, addressed, and changed. I did not have a specific number. I just started writing down these notes. The first thing that popped into my head, and it wasn't even a question mark, we got to develop better. How do we out-recruit? High school recruiting rankings, transfer portal recruiting rankings. I did a show earlier this year where I compared us. I compared us to Minnesota. I compared us to Iowa. I compared us to Indiana. I compared us to USC. I compared us to all these teams. Only USC has out-recruited us in high school recruiting rankings and transfer portal recruiting rankings, even though we had a top 5 transfer portal class a year ago. So how? How are we 1-10 versus Iowa? How has Minnesota beat us like 19,422 times in a row? Like, how? It's a few things. And it starts, and I'm going to get into a lot of these things in my humble opinion. Now, if you disagree, let me know. If I missed anything, let me know. It starts with development. It starts with developing the players you have. If I walk in the door and I have a higher ceiling than someone who walks in the door of another football program, but that person gets better at a faster rate. Let's say they get coached up, the weight program, their mindset is something they buy into. Let's say these things help them accelerate the culture, whatever the case may be, accelerate their improvement at a faster rate than mine. It doesn't matter that my ceiling is higher. I'm not guaranteed to be better than them if they improve better, faster, and at a farther rate, for lack of a better way of putting it, than I do. They're going to become a better football player. We have to improve how we develop players at a much faster rate. If we have more talented guys, I'm going to use that word. We don't get out-athleted very often, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, if we have more talented guys when they walk through the door, yet at the end of the day, on the football field, we're losing to those same teams that don't have as much talent walking in their door. It's that middle piece that we're missing. And it's all encompassing. From lifting weights to practicing to what you're doing with them from a coaching perspective. It's, do the players buy in? What is expected of them? If you only expect a certain amount of things from them, that's the ceiling you've now created. But if you expect more, Talk to guys who played for Pelini. He was demanding, and they loved him for it because he knew they'd have their back. But he held them accountable. He talked to Roy Hulu, talked to Prince Amukamara, talked to Levante David. I've interviewed all of them. They all talked about the demand that was expected of them from Coach Pelini. And then he knew at the end of the day they'd have their back. Now, Coach Pelini is not the coach here anymore, but we got to develop players better. Number two, we got to evaluate, in my humble opinion, a little bit better. We got to have a higher batting average when it comes to guys we bring in and then the amount of guys who actually produce on the football field. I hate saying players' names. There are things that I'm proud of in my career. There are things that I wish I would have done differently, that I wish I would have done better, that I would have been better at. So I'm not exempt from this. If anybody ever wants to put me on one of these lists one day in the future. But I think back to transfer portal guys specifically. I think back to a guy like Jeff Sims, Eric Gilbert, Micah Mazuka, Stephon Thompson. He's a guy who started as a freshman at Syracuse and did not do a ton when he was here. Dante Dowdell's a guy who did some things while he was here. First of all, he shouldn't have been starting in front of Emmett. Okay, that's pretty obvious at this point in time, but he never quite lived up to the expectations that we had for him as an overall whole. And one other thing that's interesting is Rhule even admitted, he said Dana Holgorsen had to talk him into playing Emmett more. So why didn't we evaluate that a little bit better and a little bit quicker and a little bit more effectively sooner? Sometimes a fresh set of eyes is a good thing, and that's okay. Nobody bats 1,000 except for Bud Crawford. That guy bats 1,000. That was pointed out to me by a fan sharply and very accurately at one point in time. But I don't want to keep saying names. There's certain guys on this year's team, okay, that we would hope to have gotten more out of. I look back to last year's team, and I'm curious to see what Jamal Banks does, Isaiah Nayor. Isaiah Nayor he was one of only 5 guys in the history of the combine to run a 40 that he ran at the height and weight that he ran it. I'm curious to see what those guys do in the NFL because Isaiah's got talent. Jamal had been an all-ACC type receiver at Wake Forest. All right, Elijah Pritchett coming back to this year's squad. There are some guys in this transfer portal class that have come onto the team this year that have made an impact. Let's talk about Kyle Cunanan, the kicker. Let's talk about Kevin Galick, who's a senior as a long snapper. Got to take care of long snapping again next year. Look at Rocco Spindler, Andrew Marshall. Okay, Elijah Pritchett has played better as the year has gone along. You want to have a higher batting average than we've had at times, and I feel like that is something that would definitely have helped us. Now, because I don't want to keep saying names, there's 3 guys that do pop into my head from this recent transfer portal class, knowing you're never going to bat 1,000 unless you're Bud Crawford, that I wish we'd have gotten more out of. One guy, had he gone to the NFL, he would have been a 3rd-round draft pick or higher. But we just got to make sure we're bringing in the right guys, not just talent, athleticism, size-wise, but guys who mentally are going to have the right approach that we want. I will say this. I do remember when Matt Rhule said about Shedeur Sanders going into the NFL draft, earlier this year, and I quote, "I would take him number 3 overall without question," end quote. That's because the Giants had the number 3 overall pick at the time. Now, we all know what happened with Shedeur. So, in fairness to Rhule, he was probably showing classiness and respect to someone that he had played against twice. So, you got to factor that in as well. I will say this. It's kind of like the NFL draft. You ever notice certain teams always draft high early in the draft, and the same teams always tend to draft late? So the teams that are drafting earlier, higher in the draft, should be getting the better players. They should be getting better, and they should draft lower in the draft as the years go along. And the teams at the end of the draft, they're not getting as good of players because they're drafting later in every round. They should eventually not be as good and have to draft higher. No. It's about evaluation. Evaluation is what matters a ton, whether it's the NFL or college football, which has become more like the NFL than it's ever been before. All right, before I move on, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, DPS Concrete Construction. Check them out at dpsconstruction.net. Ladies and gentlemen, they are your local concrete and retaining wall experts. If this is the type of work you want done, dpsconstruction.net. These are the guys you want to do. If this type of work you do, Jason Armstrong is the guy you want to work for. He is the owner of DPS Construction. Again, check it out at dpsconstruction.net. Also, shout out to Husker Auto Group. Husker Chevrolet and GMC have aggressive pricing on 2025 model Silverados and Sierras up to $11,000 off of MSRP. APR as low as 2.9% financing with approved accredited dealer for details. Husker Chevrolet and GMC also has a great selection of 3/4-ton Silverado and Sierra trucks. Husker Chevrolet and GMC is locally owned and operated. Husker Auto Group is conveniently located off North 27th Street and I-80 in North Lincoln. Also available 24/7 at huskerautogroup.com. All right, my third key, emphasize the most important things as opposed to feeling like sometimes maybe we emphasize the flashiest things. What I'm getting at is the trenches. We got to emphasize the trenches. Games are won and lost in the trenches. This is not flag football. This is tackle, blue collar, in your face, smash mouth football. This is the Big Frickin' 10. This isn't the Pac-12 that doesn't exist anymore, the old school Pac-10. This is the Big 10. This is tackle football. You know why Iowa beats us? Because they beat us every year in the frickin' trenches, the offensive line, the defensive line. You want to know why Minnesota beats us? Because of the trenches. They weren't even that good this year at rushing the passer. They had 0 sacks the previous 2 games combined before they played us, and they walked away with 9 sacks versus us. I watched them play. I watched their offensive line versus some opponents, Purdue in particular, before they played us. They didn't look that great. Nebraska used to beat teams up front and in the trenches. When it comes to Remington Award winners, Outland winners, Lombardi Trophy Award winners, Nebraska has more than any other school in history. That's why we were so good for so long. We need to get back to winning the battle up front in the trenches. All right. Now, I will say this. Rhule mentioned before the Minnesota game, because this factors in. This is his words that his assistant coaches weren't ready for what they were going to face that night in Minnesota. All right. And the players, the score was 7-6 at halftime, if you recall, had their heads down and thought it would be easy. Nothing is easy, and honestly, nothing that's easy is probably worth doing anyways. I remember the talk going into that game, the icy white uniforms, alternate uniforms. We've worn all white, all red, and all black uniforms this year. Now, I will say the blackout was pretty cool. And you could argue, if Dylan doesn't get hurt in that game, I still think we would have beat USC. You know what? I'm also sick and tired of excuses. Find a way. David Eicholt, he used to be here at Nebraska, went to University of Nebraska. Now he covers Iowa football. I ran into him at the press conference and the press box at the Iowa game. And we were talking about last year's game. I've said on this show, they found a way to beat us. Iowa did a year ago with a third-string walk-on quarterback. Eicholt goes, no, he was a fourth-string walk-on quarterback. It's even worse than I thought. Here's my point. I don't want to hear excuses. I'm sick of excuses. Let's start emphasizing what matters. All right? And what's going to help us win football games. And it starts in the trenches. I don't want to hear about alternate uniforms anymore, which honestly I supported. I supported, not because I'm a fan of alternate uniforms. I supported it because the university asked us to support it, and I want to support the university. Okay? Here's what I want to hear about going forward, though. I want to hear blocking, tackling, mauling people at the point of attack, and getting after opposing quarterbacks. By the way, this is kind of everything that Matt Rhule used to talk about when he first got here. Running the ball, stopping the run, being physical. Guess what? That all starts up front with the wide bodies, the big uglies, and I can call them that because I was a defensive lineman. It all starts up front in the trenches. Number 4. By the way, I did not know how many there was going to be. I think I ended up with 8 of these randomly. Yeah, I think there's 8 of these that I have. Number 4, being more physical. Now, obviously, that's going to start up front in the trenches. Obviously, that's going to be blocking and tackling, which I just mentioned. But here's what else it is. It's being bigger, faster, and stronger. They got to hit the weight room so hard this offseason. They got to make the weight room bleed. All right. Also, it's a mental approach. It's a mentality. I think we need a little bit of a different mentality, a mentality focused less on, per se, appearances. And I'm speaking as a whole. Okay, there's obviously individual guys who have the appropriate mentality, etc. But as a whole, you can't look at the Penn State game. You can't look at the Iowa game. You can't look at the Minnesota game. Minnesota was supposed to be an outlier, and then Penn State happened, and then Iowa happened. That's not an outlier anymore. You can't look at those games and tell me that as a whole, we are as physical as we should be, whether it's from a physical standpoint, a physicality standpoint, or a mental toughness approach, which will affect how physical you are on the field. Personally, I like to be mentally focused less on appearances, feelings, and more on what's real, what matters, and what's actually happening on the football field, and less on things like social media. Now, Adam, you didn't have to deal with things trending. Social media is different than it's ever been. Okay. Every generation has to deal with their own unique challenges. The moment you think you have it tougher than everyone else, you've created an entitlement and a victim mentality. And if a coach hands that to his players, you're going to get what happened at Minnesota, Penn State, and Iowa. If that happens with a coach giving his players those excuses. It doesn't have to be Nebraska, it can be any team. Every generation has their own unique challenges. You think back to yesteryear. Two-a-days, which became illegal, by the way, when I was a redshirt freshman. These guys don't have to do two-a-days. That's not a knock on them. By the way, I'm half jealous. You know, way back when, before social media ever existed, there were some coaches who did three-a-days. All right, when I played, there was Sports Center highlights. There was social media had just started. All right, Trev Alberts he was on ESPN. He wasn't holding back. Tommy Frazier had a show that he was doing. He wasn't holding back. They have a right to their opinions. I never once got mad at him for it, as long as it was honest and real. It was definitely harsh at times, but I respected that. In today's day and age, you've also got to keep in mind, there are some players making 6 and 7 figures. This is going to be factored in when people are evaluating things. Okay? They're going to make more in a couple years than some people will make in a couple of decades. I'm not mad at them. I'm happy for it. But you got to keep that in mind. Okay? Because all fans really want from players, just go earn it. Physically being bigger, faster, and stronger, and mentally tougher as a whole, with a different mental focus as a collective team, which will hopefully make us a tougher team for 4 full quarters, especially when it comes to blocking, tackling, in the fourth quarter, in the second half. The way Nebraska football has won games for a long time, up until, unfortunate, some recent years. All right. Now, Dana Holgorsen on offense. This is a bit of an intriguing one to me. So a couple of things real quick. So Dana said he's been given the keys. Like, he can do what he wants on offense. Now, he did tell me directly he has learned their terminology that they had previously. Now, you watch the offense this year, and it's kind of been thrown out. And even I've wondered, is this like Satterfield's old playbook? But, Holgorsen's just calling the plays. I don't know that for sure. Whatever the case is, I can honestly say I've never seen a Holgorsen offense look quite like this schematically. But he did say it's going to be more NFL style-esque than it's ever been. He said that last offseason coming into this offseason. And if this is what he wants it to be, so be it. All right. But whatever the case is, if it hasn't happened yet, Dana Holgorsen just needs to be Dana Holgorsen. So let's look at the defensive side of the ball. Prioritize stopping the run. Prioritize stopping the run. We should stop the run first. That's the priority. Okay. Now, do we need to change the 3-3-5 defense or the hybrid defense that they're running with some 4-man down sometimes? I know Matt Rhule loves the 3-3-5. I know that. I'd be pretty surprised if they change it. 3-4, 4-3. I'm partial to 4-3-3-4, but here's what I'll tell you. You got to run what you believe in. So whether they change it or not, you got to prioritize stopping the run. Now, does that involve bigger bodies? Yeah, it probably does. John Butler even said as much at his most recent press conference. Okay, more aggressive play calling. During the Minnesota game, Butler admitted they gave up a big run early on. And all of a sudden, he wasn't quite as aggressive the rest of the game. So he admitted that, okay? Emphasizing stopping the run in the play calling. This isn't the NFL where you're playing Patrick Mahomes and you're playing Lamar Jackson, although he runs a ton, but Josh Allen, all these guys, where you stop the pass first and you play the run on the way to the pass a majority of the time. This is college football. This is Big Ten, where you're playing Iowa, you're playing Minnesota, you're playing Michigan, you're playing all these teams. You got to stop the run first. Now, for me, I think it's a little bit of everything how we do that. I do think John Butler's his resume is phenomenal. I do think he's incurring a little bit of a learning curve as a defensive coordinator. Okay, the only way to get experience is to go out and do something. So I get that. His resume is there. His knowledge is there. We got a first-time defensive line coach and a defensive line room that he was somewhat handed, okay, this past offseason. So we'll see how he progresses. I mean, you look at his resume with the Chiefs. I mean, goodness, he's ready to be a defensive line coach. I'm not questioning that. Okay, I do think seeing things beforehand that sometimes, I don't want to say they seem obvious, but like in the offseason, like looking at the offensive tackle situation and the defensive line and being like, we need to be ready for things there is how I'll put that. I do think you got to be able to see those things beforehand. Number 7, identity. Who and what is Nebraska football right now? I don't know. I feel like Rhule came in emphasizing one thing. Running the ball, stopping the run, being physical, blue collar, in your face, smash mouth. Now we almost look the exact opposite. Trev Alberts and Matt Rhule, it took a while to figure out that contract. Do you know why Trev wanted him so bad? Because exactly what Nebraska is, that's how Matt Rhule wanted to build his football team. That's why Trev wanted him so bad. Plus, he's supposed to be a program builder. Nebraska's blue-collar, in-your-face, smash-mouth, respectful, hard-working people. That's who Trev believes Matt Rhule is, and that's how Trev wanted the program to look under Matt Rhule. I want that to be our identity, or can we just have an identity? Because I don't exactly know what it is. The way it appears to me is we built our team around a quarterback, and I've said it before, so I'm not going to explain it again. Now the team reminds me of an old-school Pac-10 team. That doesn't have to be good. I just don't think that was the original intention. All right, so 8. It is 8 things. This is the final thing. Again, I didn't have a set number in mind. So 8 things that could be changed to help this program. And that's all I want. Do what's best for Nebraska football, prioritizing the program. Here's what I mean. You can't do what's best for long-term friendships. You can't do what's best for people you've known for a long time or people you've coached with for a long time. Matt Rhule's incredibly loyal to his coaches. I'm not saying anyone should be fired or anyone shouldn't be fired. What I'm saying is everyone needs to be evaluated. And whether they maintain their current job or not needs to be determined by one thing. Not how long I've known you, not how long we've coached together, not how good of friends we are. It's, are you what's best in the current role that you have here at the University of Nebraska for this football program? Now, it can't be what's best for a particular family or family members. You look at Kirk Ferentz. His son, Brian Ferentz, was his offensive coordinator for a long time. To be clear, family should be above football in life. You don't think Kirk Ferentz loves Brian more than he loves football? Dare I say Iowa football? I believe he does. But within the context of Iowa football, Kirk had to let go of his son because he was not the best person to run their offense at Iowa. He was not the best offensive coordinator for Iowa football, so Kirk had to let go of his son because it was the best thing for the Iowa football program. Now, I'll just give you an example. And I bring up Donovan Raiola simply because he's been the most talked about assistant coach this entire offseason who's not a coordinator. So, as an example, and this is not my call to make, but if someone was like, hey, maybe a new offensive line coach might be a good idea. I mean, he's been here for 4 years, which is longer than Rhule. He was hired the same time as Mark Whipple. Think about that. Okay. Maybe doing something different with the offensive line is a good idea. That's not my call. That's Matt Rhule's call. I think it's a fair thing to wonder. I think it's a fair question to ask. But here's the thing. Another thing that's been mentioned is a couple of people's future are tied together. Maybe they're not. I don't know. I do think it's fair to wonder. But if they're not tied together, hey, that's actually better, in my opinion. But if they are tied together, then so be it. We got to do what's best. And again, this is Matt Rhule's call. It's not my call. And I just picked Donovan because he's the most talked about guy. Everybody should be evaluated at this point because some things need to change. How things are done, who's doing certain things, they need to be evaluated. And this is Matt Rhule's call. I'm just simply saying out loud what a million people have said to me, to be honest with you. We have to do what's best for this football program, university, state, and not a particular handful of people, whatever that group of people may be. So in summation, we need to develop better. We need to have a higher batting average when it comes to bringing in people, whether it's high school recruiting, whether it's transfer portal, who actually help contribute on the field at a higher level. We don't get out-athleted very often. We get out-developed too often. It's inexcusable that Iowa is 10-1 against us the last 11 years, but they're 0-11 when it comes to out-recruiting Nebraska. Number 3, we got to get better in the trenches. Number 4, we need to be more physical and tougher, physically, mentally, as an overall whole. All right, number 5, and maybe I'll get a chance to talk to Dana at some point, but let's cut Dana loose on offense if that hasn't already happened, whatever that looks like. Number 6, stop the run first on defense. Number 7, find an identity. Honestly, find an identity. I'd love it to be physicality, blue collar, in your face, smash mouth football, and then everything else can fall into place. But let's find some sort of identity. And last but certainly not least, let's prioritize doing what's best for this football program and university. Everybody and everything is up for evaluation. Tough decisions may need to be made by the head man in charge. I think one of the things that's tough for Nebraska fans is the past couple games, we feel like you can't even compete. I think that bothers a lot of Nebraska fans. There are some positives. Like one thing I would I'd love to see more Mike Eckler's. Not just because the special teams has exponentially improved. His energy, his enthusiasm. Matt Rhule's even talked about there's days that he comes in and he's having a hard time, because he's a human being too. And Eckler's like the one that picks him up. He doesn't overcomplicate things. He teaches basics, fundamentals, do it well, do it fast, do it physical, do it now. He believes in accountability. When I officially became an Eckler fan, and I was already an Eckler fan, was last offseason. He did a press conference during camp and he said, if we don't play well on special teams, hold me accountable. I was like, All right. And Nebraska matters to him. Now, he's from Nebraska. He's coached here before. You don't have to be from Nebraska to be a good player, good coach, etc. But Nebraska needs to matter to you on some level. I can't help but wonder, like he came back here for a reason, left Tennessee for a reason. Tennessee's doing better right now than Nebraska. He came back because Nebraska matters to him. Nebraska has to matter to the people involved to some level or degree. All right. Now, keep in mind, this is a very young team. It's not all doom and gloom, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very young team. We had 3 new coordinators this past offseason leading into this season. So just keep that in mind. Here's a couple other things. This is the first 200-yard rushing game, Emmett Johnson versus Iowa. This is the first 200, because he ran for 226 yards, Emmett Johnson did versus the Hawkeyes. This is the first 200-yard rushing game by a Husker since Amir Abdullah rushed for 225 yards against Rutgers on August 25th, 2014, over a decade ago. Johnson's 217 rush yards were the most against Iowa this season. The previous 2 games combined, Iowa had given up an average of less than 100 rushing yards a game to their teams as a whole, not just one guy. This is a fun stat, I think. Marquez Watson-Trent had 5 tackles versus the Hawkeyes to give him 400 career tackles in his collegiate career. He's just the second active FBS player with 400 career tackles. So here's a little bonus for you, ladies and gentlemen. My bonus would be don't panic. There needs to be a sense of urgency. But what's that old saying? Go quick, but don't hurry. There needs to be a vast sense of urgency, but don't panic. Bad decisions are made when people panic. All right, here's a couple of things you might find interesting as well. If you've been listening on podcasts, my wife's been putting up pictures all throughout this show because I didn't have time to go through every single picture. But here's a couple of things. So when it was reported by CBS Sports that Dylan may or may not enter the transfer portal, things of that nature, I read through the article. And if you zoom down to this paragraph, this was Matt Rhule talking, all right? And I quote, I just had one authentic and long conversation with Dylan and he made the decision. So this was last September heading into this football season. I just had one authentic and long conversation with Dylan and he made the decision. Rhule told CBS Sports in September. All right. Then I said, okay, let's go out and get the players you want and that I want in order to be the team that we want moving forward. So that was going into this year, referring to the possibility of last year's transfer portal. Dylan stayed. But hold on. Matt Rhule said, let's go out and get the players that you want. Those are Matt Rhule's words reported by CBS Sports. Let me go back to these are Matt Rhule's decisions to make, in my humble opinion. What are your thoughts on that? All right. I will say this. Up to this point, I don't think Matt Rhule's year 3 has necessarily been a success here at the University of Nebraska. You go win a bowl game, and I will consider it acceptable, but not successful. Now, I will say this. You lose the bowl game, this is the easiest schedule that we have had in a long time. I don't even know that you can consider it a lateral season. With the lack of strength of schedule, you might consider this a step backwards, even though we have the same record as we did last year. Because last year's schedule wasn't that tough. This year's was even less tough. And we had 5 games that I would consider big games. Okay, you got USC, Michigan, big brands. Games that Nebraska fans really want to win. Minnesota, Iowa. And then Penn State, national television, a team who was preseason number 2. We lost all 5 of them. Outside of Cincinnati, you look at the teams we beat, it was like Maryland, Michigan State, Northwestern, with all due respect. Like any team that was halfway decent or halfway recognizable, we lost to them. And that's frustrating. That's why these changes need to happen. I will point out this. Brian Christopherson put this out on X. We got to be healthier as a team. No surprises for the Huskers unavailable reported to my eye. But look at the amount of players that Iowa had out going into our game on Black Friday and the amount of players we had out. If you're on podcast and you can't see this, there's a lot more under Nebraska's injury report than under Iowa's injury report. Dave Remington, I saw this on his Facebook. He said, I'm very interested in seeing how Nebraska football will build its roster when GM Pat Stewart implements his plan. I'm pretty sure that the portal will be a big part of the mix, but I hope that building through recruiting Nebraska high school players still has a part to play. Nebraska has produced more than their share of Heisman, Outland, and Lombardi Award winners. By the way, Eric Crouch, Johnny Rogers, both from Nebraska, Omaha. Okay. I'd hate to see college football become a complete mercenary operation. And shout out to Millard South, maybe the greatest high school football team Nebraska has ever seen. All right, Millard South ended its season as expected with a repeat Class A state title and running clock throughout the second half. Shout out to Jet Tamale. He's going to go play at Alabama. All right, his name is all over the record books now when it comes to 11-man football. Best of luck to him going forward in the future. All right, here's a couple of things you just might find interesting, or you might not. Here we go. I'm a big fan of the GPS theory. When you miss a turn, your GPS doesn't judge you, it reallocates you. It recalculates you. No matter how many detours you take, it finds another way forward. Life works like that too. You'll make a mistake, but your destination doesn't vanish. The route just changes. Made me think of Nebraska football. All right, here's another one from Coach John Beck. Parents, the world won't hand out trophies for effort. Teach your kids that happiness isn't built on praise, it's built on perseverance. Confidence doesn't come from comfort, it comes from falling short, learning, and still showing up again tomorrow with a better attitude and effort. Again, I thought of Nebraska football, but also I'm big into youth sports, so that matters there too. Amy Just, Nebraska men's and the Nebraska women's basketball teams are both 7-0. I think Nebraska basketball plays today, so by the time this show goes out tomorrow, hopefully they're 8-0. Okay, but that would be a combined 15-0 between the two basketball programs combined. The last time that happened was 1992, 1993. The two teams have had 7-0 starts independently since then, but not in the same season. All right, also, it is genuinely fun to watch Nebraska men's basketball play. It is a smart team. I could not agree more. Also, shout out to Connor Essegian. He had a season-ending ankle injury. Speedy recovery to him. Shout out to Nebraska volleyball. Again, I'm recording this before their match versus Ohio State tonight. I'm going to assume they won because they're going to Nebraska volleyball, and that's what Nebraska volleyball does. That would put them at a 30-0 undefeated season heading into the postseason. I just thought this was funny. 4 stages of a man's life. Number 1, you believe in Santa. Number 2, you don't believe in Santa. Number 3, you are Santa. Number 4, you look like Santa. All right, and who remembers blowing into the Nintendo cartridge and tapping it on the console to get the game to work? If you remember that, give it a bonus smash to the like button, and I'll leave you with this. Some people don't like you because you're exactly who you say you are. Meanwhile, they got to pick and choose what mask they're going to wear each day. All right, here are my questions for you fine folks at home. Let me know your answers in the comments below. These questions are brought to you by Husker Auto Group. Check them out at huskerautogroup.com. You can also follow me on the social medias, X, TikTok, and Facebook. First question, are there any changes that need to happen at the University of Nebraska's football program that I missed? Number 2, any changes I mentioned that I believe need to happen you disagree with? Number 3, what's the single biggest change, if nothing else was different? What's the single biggest change you think needs to happen at the University of Nebraska's football program this offseason, starting this bowl season? Go Big Red, and always remember, throw them bones.